Imagine for a moment that feeling, that creeping dread that hits you right in your core. The fear of being buried alive. It's a primal, ancient fear, isn't it? Something that, well, it seems to transcend cultures and centuries.
Mm,
And that very fear is right at the chilling heart of the fascinating folklore story we're diving into today.
the lady with the ring.
Yeah, and this isn't just, some spooky tale. It's actually a remarkably persistent narrative. It captivated imaginations across Europe from the 14th all the way through to the 19th centuries. So our deep dive today, looking into the sources, it's going to reveal how this story, with its really shocking premise, it doesn't just highlight that fundamental human fear of premature burial, but it also kind of acts as a cultural mirror.
A cultural mirror, how so?
Well, it reflects societal anxieties about death, the fragility of life, and the surprising power of folklore to adapt and spread. Our mission really is to unpack its surprising commonalities, its unique, sometimes bizarre twists, and truly understand why it resonated so profoundly with people for hundreds of years. Okay, let's unpack this central dramatic scene then, because it genuinely sets the stage. You have a woman, tragically believed to be dead, who is then buried or entombed, often with a valuable ring still on her finger.
Right. That ring is key.
Exactly. And then the story takes a dark turn. Shortly after the burial, a grave robber, sometimes it's even a corrupt sexton, which just adds this layer of moral murkiness.
Oh, yeah, that makes it even worse.
Disinters the body, their sole grim intent to steal that valuable ring. But here's where it gets, well, really interesting. The robber can't just slide the ring off, it's stuck. So they pull out a knife, preparing to cut off her finger. Gruesome stuff. And upon making that initial incision, the woman awakens, terrifying the robber, obviously.
Absolutely terrifying.
She was never dead, just
So-
a victim of premature burial. It's just horrifying, but also strangely a moment of profound relief.
It is. And what's fascinating here is how that core premise then twists and turns into some truly wild variations. And each twist sort of offers a window into the societal anxieties and hopes of the time.
Okay, what kind of variations are we talking about?
Well, for instance, in some versions, the grave robber dies instantly of fright the moment the woman awakes.
Ah, instant karma.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
A kind of immediate karmic justice that speaks to, perhaps, a deep human need for moral order, even when things are completely inexplicable. Then there's the incredible journey home. The woman, now revived, walks a considerable distance, sometimes through the dead of night, to get back to her family.
That must have been an ordeal in itself.
You can only imagine.
Hmm.
But it doesn't always end happily right there. Sometimes you find this devastating detail where her husband or family, upon seeing her, believe she's a ghost. They refuse her entry into her own home.
Oh, wow.
Well,
That's heartbreaking.
it really is. It's a poignant reflection on that fragile line between life and death and how trauma can alienate even loved ones. And then there's maybe one of the most incredible variations.
Go on.
The person refusing entry declares that her return from the dead is as impossible as, say, horses running up the stairs in the house.
Oh, this is running up the stairs. Okay.
And in that very moment, horses are heard and then seen, with their heads emerging from a high window of the house.
No way.
Yes. And that's what finally convinces the disbelieving family member she's real. It's not just a bizarre detail, it's this powerful symbol maybe of divine intervention, or the universe just bending to confirm an impossible truth. It perhaps satisfies a cultural craving for, irrefutable proof when something miraculous happens.
That's incredible. So did she usually get a happy ending after all that?
Thankfully, yes. Many versions end on a high note. She lives for many more years, bears numerous children. A return to normalcy, sort of. But of course, there's always a potential tragic twist, too. Sometimes the husband dies of fright upon seeing her return.
Oh, man. So even the happy ending can be tinged with darkness.
Exactly. It's a chilling reminder of the story's darker core, even in the resolution.
So when we see this story literally popping up across an entire continent, it really makes you wonder about the mechanics of how folklore travels, doesn't it? Is it purely word of mouth? Or are there, I don't know, underlying social currents or shared anxieties that make certain stories so sticky across borders?
That's a great question. And the reach of the lady with the ring is genuinely mind-boggling. This story, in its many forms, you can find it in almost every single European country.
Seriously, where?
We're talking Germany, the Netherlands, France, Scandinavia, Italy, England, Scotland, Ireland. The list goes on.
Wow. That really speaks to a universal human experience, doesn't it? A shared vulnerability to death and maybe a hope for reversal.
Absolutely. And to emphasize its enduring human appeal, its presence even extends beyond Europe. For example, a version of this very tale is told about a former resident of Lunenburg, Nova Scotia in Canada.
Lunenburg, so it crossed the Atlantic too.
It did. This isn't just a European phenomenon. It taps into something global about human anxiety and unexpected resurrection. It suggests certain themes just resonate so deeply that they leap geographical and cultural boundaries, mutating slightly but keeping their core intact.
Let's dive into some of the specific examples then from different regions, because this is where the story truly comes to life in a tangible way. Perhaps the most famous version comes from Germany, right? Specifically Cologne.
That's the one. The story of rich Modus von Educt, wife of Minginus von Educt.
And when was this supposed to have happened?
Well, it's popularly said to have happened during the Black Death in 1357, though some versions place it later, maybe the 16th century. The dates are a bit fuzzy.
Right. And if you go to Cologne today, to Richmosstrasse, you can find Richmod's house, which is also, interestingly, the birthplace of the composer Max Bruch.
That's the place, and that's where the Educts supposedly lived.
And isn't there some kind of commemoration there, something visible?
Oh yes, the visual commemoration in Cologne is striking. From a tower window at Rich Modi's house, two sculpted horse heads look out.
The horses again, from the Impossible Sign variation.
Exactly, it's quite the sight. These particular heads were installed in 1958 by a sculptor named Wilhelm Müllermaus. They actually replaced earlier wooden ones by Christoph Stephen that were tragically destroyed during the bombing of Cologne in World War II.
Wow, so the city felt it was important enough to recreate them.
Absolutely. And what's even more fascinating, back in 1920, an ethnologist did some research. He found there were 19 different cities across Germany that claimed a version of the Lady of the Rings story had occurred there.
19 cities.
Germany alone. 19. And in 11 of those cases, they featured horse sculptures, just like in Cologne. Cities like Hamburg, Lübeck, Dresden, Freiburg. They all had their own versions with this eerie equine sign.
That's incredible. It really highlights how communities will adopt and localize powerful myths, making them their own, doesn't it?
It really does. But it also raises that important question you touched on earlier.
About historical accuracy versus, well, just a really good story.
Precisely. How much is genuine local tradition and how much is just borrowing a popular narrative? Sometimes the story itself becomes more important than the facts.
Okay, so let's move across the water to the British Isles. It seems like they also had quite a few specific women identified with this story.
They did. In 18th century England, for example, the woman in the tale was often identified as Emma Edgecombe, Countess Mount Edgecombe, wife of the first Earl.
But didn't you say her ancestor was linked too?
Yes, exactly. Even a century before that, her ancestor, Lady Anne Edgecombe, was also commonly associated with this story. Shows how these things can attach to families. And beyond the Edgecombes, you find others. Anne of Benallay, Lady Catherine Wyndham, Hannah Goodman, Constance Whitney. Several names pop up.
And in Scotland.
Similar pattern. The woman was sometimes identified as Marjorie Elphinstone, who is the second wife of Robert Drummond of Carnock, or occasionally Margaret Helco Erskine.
So lots of potential candidates, historically speaking.
Lots of candidates, but often thin evidence connecting them definitively to this specific event. You know, it's more about the legend attaching itself to known figures.
Right. Which brings us to Ireland, and this question of historical veracity versus folklore really comes into play there, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, especially with the Irish version. Here, the story involves a woman named Marjorie McCall. The incident is reportedly dated quite specifically to 1695, said to have occurred in Church Place, Lurgan, and she was married to a John McCall.
Okay, 1695, Lurgan, Marjorie, and John McCall. Seems specific enough. Can we verify it?
Well, that's where it gets ambiguous. The Public Records Office, PRNI, does record the deaths of 9 Marjorie McCalls in Lurgan, and 3 of those were married to a John McCall.
Okay, so that sounds promising.
But Shankill Parish itself has no record of a birth, burial, or marriage for a Marjorie McCall to a John McCall in Lurgan around that time.
So a gap in the records.
Could be. The historian Jim Conway notes that many records were lost during the Great Hunger, which might explain this gap. It's possible. Yeah. But what profoundly highlights the enduring nature of the legend, regardless of its strict historical basis, is the tangible evidence you can see today.
What evidence is that?
In Shankill Cemetery, there's a gravestone. It's undated. A local monumental sculptor named Harkin was actually permitted to erect it in the 19th century, specifically as a tourist attraction, directly referencing this legend. It's the only undated stone there.
Wow, so they literally put up a monument to the legend itself, even without definitive proof.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the stories we tell and the physical markers we create for them, they become more real in the public imagination than perhaps the historical facts, especially when those facts are ambiguous or lost. It shapes our cultural landscape, how we remember.
And there you have it, our deep dive into The Lady with the Ring. From its central, chilling premise to its myriad dramatic variations and its astonishing spread across continents, this single folklore tale really captures centuries of human fear, and hope too. It's a testament, I think, to how these stories manifest in countless forms, yet they endure through time, speaking to something universal in all of us, that collective fascination with the boundaries of life and death.
Absolutely. And as you reflect on this journey through folklore, maybe consider this thought. This story, passed down through generations, it isn't just about a dramatic rescue, is it? What does its enduring popularity truly tell you about our collective fears of oblivion, our deep-seated fascination with the unexpected return, and perhaps the surprising power of a single valuable item, that ring, to not only change a life, but maybe even bring it back from the grave? Makes you think, right?